Zoom started acting a little weird, so I'm thinking I probably have to have an update somewhere pending.
And I'm not sure how to share your control. There's a way you can
I have to
control it
request
yourself.
I have to request it.
Okay.
Zoom started acting a little weird. So I have an update somewhere. And mute myself. Okay. Boy, do I sound any different for this?
No, you sound great.
I've
Just like
somehow
every
been
day.
using the mic wrong directionally.
Ah, yeah. I mean, you sound clearer today than you have in the past, but I mean, I haven't
That's
ever noticed a problem.
literally what it was. It was not pointing quite correctly.
Right.
But all right. Um, trying to think. I think we left off back here, but that's about how much I read today. Yeah,
That's right. The yeah, we were starting to get into refraction, among other things.
right. Trying to remember. Yeah, I think we're doing right about here. Talked about the fact that it sort of the shape at this point is a body of pure crystal and some sort of homogeneity. So we have the concept of transparency or medium for light,
Hmm.
which because it's indifferent to the light that's passing through it, so it must be clear. So nothing yet about opaque bodies. Those tries light first. Yeah, identity is not posed. Secondly, the identity is specified with respect to another. The comparison of true transparent media we're about to start, which is refraction, where the medium is not purely transparent but specifically determined. Thirdly, we have color as a property, such as a metallic body, mechanically neutral but not chemically slow. So, and that's why we're moving up to form free. It's because yeah, the form I think we're right about here. So now the identity does not itself shine when it's kindle light, but it's almost reaching the stage of shining because it's basically transparent to light. Their archetypal crystal is a diamond of earth in which every eye rejoices. Recognize the first one is my gravity. Light is the abstract, pure, perfectly free identity. Air, the elemental identity. The subordinate identity is passing the light. Yeah. Trying to. Okay, so I think we were. Yeah. There's because basically, if it's not perfectly clear, you break it up, it's white, which means it's just sort of diffusing light. Therefore, chemically neutral, this or opaque, they have yeah, because of metallic base, ruby, olive oil can be used to become transparent. A mix of things act. Yeah, here we go. B, the first simplest determinant possessed by the physical medium is its specific gravity, whose peculiar nature is specifically manifested in comparison. And so, also in regard to transparency, it manifests only in the comparison with a different density of another medium. To facilitate the exposition and illustration of this point, let us assume that our two media are water and air. Then the action of the first medium, let it be the one further from the eye, on the second is solely that of density, as what qualitatively determines place. And again, here, place is apparent, not literal, not actual place. The volume of water which the image in it is thus seen in the transparent air as if the same volume of air, which the volume of water is placed, had the greater specific gravity, that of water, i.e., as if the volume of air were contracted into a correspondingly small space, so-called refraction. Which, I mean, to a certain extent. That does happen with air too. Which we got the many different examples of temperature difference caused appearances and illusions is a word I was thinking of. Okay.
As I was reading through some of this week,
Mhm.
I really had to keep in the back of my mind um, that we're in the the section that really focuses on differentiation
Mhm.
of elements and how they're related to each other. Um,
Right.
as you remember in the first section, it's just like the logic, the different um, the categories sort of
And sort of they are.
they're not held in differentiation from each other. It's more like they slip from one to another to another to
Mhm.
another in terms of what they denote. But here they're a little more hard and fast, and they're held in opposition to their differentiation. And that, yeah.
Yeah,
And
I guess I'm trying to think the empirical side of this. This is just to say that the difference, the thing that causes refraction as we see it is the change of the speed of light between mediums. So again, it's still in the realm of appearance, but it's caused by the difference between two things rather than either of the two things themselves. So it's not the water that's bending light, but the transition into from air to water. Or thinking about it in the actual sense is that the light slows down enough that as it kind of changes the not the frequency necessarily, but the way the wavelength of the wave of light is translated, and so it effectively changes its angle geometrically. It's kind of interesting to think about it that way, that it's the change of medium first and the angle is a result, rather than just it changes angle because it's water now. The expression refraction of lights. Yeah, the proverbial example, when you hold a stick or a pencil in a water, it appears to be broken. Expression is also naturally applied geometrical description of the phenomena. So yeah, like Snell's law and such, where it's just described of the change of angle. But of course, as philosophers, they don't. There we go. Hey, Jim. So it's not just the angle of it's not just this angle. It does much more than that. The physical meaning and fraction of light and of so-called light rays is quite another matter, and it's found much harder to understand than it appears at first sight. And I've been trying to think through this as I'm going through. I'm trying to figure out how much of this is just the description of his own time, and I'm trying to explain it, and how much of this is just the same oversimplification that we see even in modern, public schools and such. Because I think we got a little past this when we got into my physics in university.
yeah, the one of the things that he brings up in this section in
Mhm.
those first couple sentences in this paragraph is the difference between what we experience refraction to be as a phenomenon to our eyes and what we're trying to make sense of it as an experience and what it actually is scientifically. And I think he brings out, it. I mean, I think he brings out that there's a difference between them, and that you have to be careful between what you see sensuously and what you know of the process itself that actually makes refraction what it is. And yeah, that's all. I probably just repeated half of what you said. Sorry.
That's fine.
Um, Yeah, physical meaning versus phenomenal, sensuous. Yeah. Yeah, that
But the,
makes sense.
and of course, so-called light ray phenomenon much harder to understand than it appears at first sight. I almost feel like it's a pun. Apart from other defects here in ordinary conception, the confusion which must result from describing light rays as if they radiated from a center in the shape of a hemisphere is quite obvious. In regard to the theory by which phenomena is usually explained, we must draw attention to an important experiment in which the flat bottom vessel filled with water seems level and thus is completely uniformly raised, a circumstance quite contradicting the theory, but which, as usual happens in such cases, for that reason ignored and passed over in the textbooks. Which I still am trying to visualize what they mean here, as if radiated from a center in the shape of a hemisphere. Right, I guess it's
Some of the science here goes
yeah.
over my head because if I ever knew half of it, it has since vacated my head.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I just not thought about this in a long time because I looked at the like even the YouTube videos don't even talk about it in this sense. And they get a little more accurate with at least the ones I watch. It's important to note that single medium we merely have simple transparency as such, and that is only the relationship of two media of different specific gravities that or densities that brings about a particularization of visibility. Termination which at the same time only fixes place, i.e., is posited by the wholly abstract density. And so this is part where I thought got more interesting when we get into the addition, but it's
Mm,
place. But an active relationship of media results not from the indifferent juxtaposition, but solely from positing of the one medium and the other. Here merely is something visible as a visual space. So again, it's an appearance, not an actuality. The second medium, so to speak, infected by the immaterial density of the first one posited in it, so that the space in which the image is seen in the second medium shows the same contraction as is suffered by this medium itself. The purely mechanical physicality, not real but ideal property of density of being merely determinative of space, is here especially present. It seems to act outside the material medium to which it belongs, since it acts solely on the space in which the object is seen. Without this ideality, the relationship cannot be understood. So, I think here we're talking about again the perspective or the kind of even the understanding the explanation of why light bends through here. It's as if it seems to act side material. It's as if it's just sort of is just sort of going through the. I'm trying to remember exactly this point,
hmm
but merely determinative. It seems to act. Oh yeah, the second medium, so to speak, infected by the immaterial density of the first one posited in it. So it's trying to treat the second medium as a broken or kind of a twisted version of the initial medium, rather than necessarily just yeah. Okay, it treats the second medium as somehow crookeding the image rather than it being the boundary between the two that actually is. That's what that is. Yes, okay, seen as if it's mater property of the water rather than necessarily the property of the light itself being bent at the point of the boundary. So talking about, the transparent crystal, which has achieved ideality, is opaque being for self, let other opaque bodies be seen through it. It is the medium, the intermediary for showing one body in another. Now, there are two phenomena here, refraction of light and the double images shown by number of crystals. The latter is in the next section. Visibility here in question is something seen through more than one transparent medium. For since the transparency is that of the individual, specifically determined body, it appears only in relation to another transparent medium. And specifically determined, the medium has its own density and other physical qualities. But this determinant only finds expression when the medium encounters another transparent medium, and the showing is mediated by both these media. Again, refraction only exists because of the differences in densities. Oop. In this, in a single medium, the mediation is a uniform showing of the object determined merely by the expansion of light. One also sees in water, one only less clearly. Yeah, so if you were entirely underwater, things would still look just as normal, although less clear. If the medium is this way single, we have only one density and therefore only one fixing of place. If there are two media, there are also two different fixings of place. Here, precisely the extremely remarkable phenomenon of refraction makes its appearance. Again, I keep wanting to bring in mind that even air to itself can still have refraction because of density differences. It seems simple, trivial. In fact, it is seen every day. Refraction, however, is a mere word. Through each medium taken separately, the object is seen in a straight line with the eye and in the same relationship with other objects is solely the relation between the two medium. If the eye sees an object through another medium, so as to see through two media, the object will be seen in a different place from the place it would have appeared had it not been for the specific nature of the second medium. That is, in another place that the one it occupies in a fulfilling context of material bodies, or the object in context of light has a different place. The image of the sun is seen, for example, even when the sun is no longer on the horizon. Right, it does bend a bit. An object in a vessel containing water is seen in a different and higher position than when the vessel is empty. Those who shoot fish know that they must aim below the spot where they see the fish because the fish is raised. Okay, shooting fish. Now here's the part I was trying to understand what he's getting at here. So the first one is the typical textbook argument, which I think is still true to this day. You both figure A with angle ARS, which is this dotted ARL, which is just the angle of incidence made by the line AD, the IA to object seen as D. Okay, so this is the perceived angle. Is still greater than the angle AUS, which is the actual angle, made with the same perpendicular by the line AO from the eye to the point O where the object actually is. It's usually said the light is refracted when in passing from a medium to another, it is diverted from its path, or that the object is seen in the changed direction ARD. But considered more closely, this does not make sense, for one medium on its own does not refract. The cause, oh, right, because this is treated as a straight line, AUO is treated as a straight line, what's actually hitting water like here, and then has this angle from whatever this point is to D. But considered more closely, light, when emerging from one medium, does not acquire a special quality has modified in its respect of the other medium. So the latter would now direct it along another path. This is shown more clearly by the following figure, which is more actually, I think, another way they do it. So this is AB to CD is one medium, CD to B to lowercase BA is another medium. So if, namely when big AB to point and point A, which that's okay, the position of the eye, where there is one medium, for example, water, then the object O is seen at O in the direction of AQO. Oh, it's an O, okay. In the direction, thus the medium CDAB does not alter the direction QO to QP. If now this medium between AB and CD, lowercase ab and CD were removed, it would be absurd to assume that O leads not to Q but to R, as if the light ray OQ had now noticed the error was above it and that it is now wanted to emerge at R in order that O should be seen at R. And similarly, beta, it would not make sense to say that O no longer led towards and through Q, from which point the ray could equally as well reach A, for O goes in all directions toward Q, just as well as towards R and so on. So again, I think it's trying to say again that now if the medium between AD and CB is removed, so if you go straight to here, it's weird to say that A is suddenly at R. The light ray somehow didn't. Okay. Is thus the phenomena seen thus to be difficult one. Difficult because here the sensible becomes ghostly. I have often turned my attention to it, in which I'll explain how I overcame this difficulty. What happens at CDAB is water, what his example here is not only transparent, but that its own peculiar nature is also seen, i.e., the ideal relation mediates the fact of seeing between A, B, and A. Act of seeing between here, the bottom of water, and from this vantage point. In treating of visibility, we are in the field of ideality, for visibility as such is the positing of something as ideally present in another. Since here what is ideally posited is still not in a unity with the material appearance, visibility is determined only by the ideal determinants which is in itself, not embodied, namely specific gravity. Color and other properties are not affected, but only the spatial relationship. In other words, I see immaterial determinateness of the medium without the medium with its material existence coming into play. You can determine the medium without the medium itself being the actual effect. The difference between one kind of matter and another does not concern the eye, but light space or the medium of the eye is also material. The material nature affects only its determination of the element. Why do I feel like I've read this, but somehow not? Okay, I guess because it's a second read. The phenomena is to be understood more exactly as follows. If we stop at the relation between water and air, well, these are only elemental transparencies, not posited in the form which has overcome gravity. And if we posit them as two neighboring media, for their effect determinants they appear prior to density, we must, if we wish to characterize them as physically concrete, have regard to all the qualities which do not yet need to consider in the development of their own peculiar nature. We see the object in a different place from one it occupies if two media are between the object and our eyes. The question is, what is happening in this case? The entire medium of CDAB, who's saying water with its object O, is posited as ideally present in its own qualitative nature in the medium CD lowercase ab. But what do I see of its qualitative nature? Or in what way? So CDA count this would be the water and this would be the air in his example. What do I see of its qualitative nature? Or in what way can this enter into the other medium? It is this qualitative immaterial nature only of the water, for example, which enters into the other medium, the air, but only in its incorporeal and qualitative and not in its chemical nature. It determines visibility without actual water. The qualitative nature is now posited in respect to visibility as active in air, i.e., the water and its content is seen as if it were air. Yeah, because the bending of the slowness of light is specifically transmitted into the air as if it because it's practically air at that as it hits the boundary. The important point is the quality of nature is visibly present in the air. The visual space formed by the water transposed into another visual space that it's transposed. So the form that formed by the air in which the eye is. What particular quality does it keep in this new visual space through which it announces itself as visible, i.e., is active? Not shape for water and air as transparent are shapeless in regard to each other, not cohesion, but specific gravity. Other characteristics, oil and combustibility, do make a difference, but that gets too complicated, basically what he says. Okay, yeah, so it's sort of because it's the visual space formed by the water transposed into another visual space. And so essentially it's like two visual spaces, one that's a little bit askew from another, then so it comes out askew, but it's not necessarily water itself that we're seeing because it's an appearance. Okay, so I'm trying to think about this. I know from the empiricalist perspective, it's because of the different densities causes changes of speed of light. But what we trying to get at here from a metaphysical perspective that he's explaining here, the airspace and water space. It is only specific to the occurrence of the one medium which shows in another. So I guess it's trying to say that if you look at water space as if it were airspace, it's going to look askew. What occasions the difficulty is the quality of specific gravity which determines place, free here from its matter, determines only the place of visibility. But what else does specific gravity mean but space determining form? The specific gravity of water, therefore, can be here active in no other way than by endowing the second visual space, the air, with the specific gravity of water. The eye starts from the visual medium of air, the first medium in which it is, in principle, its unity. It is now faced by a second medium, that of water, in which place it posits the space of the air and reduces the former to the latter. Consequently, since it is only this difference which comes to account to the volume which the airspace would occupy if it had the density of water, for the water space makes itself visible in another space, that of air. A certain amount of water is therefore made into air which retains the specific gravity of water. The visible airspace has the same extent as the water, but is now invested with the specific gravity of water. It acquires a smaller volume, though its content is the same. The water space being now transposed into airspace, instead of the medium of water, I see that of air. The quantum of air, of course, remains the same extensive quantum, but the volume of water appears only as large as if an equal amount, i.e., an equal volume. Okay, he's trying to think about this visually. He's essentially it's the treating the density, treating as the water as if it was air at the density of water shrinks its volume space. Again, it's visually because they're trying to be because you're basically trying to see these two mediums as if they were equal for light because they are transparent. So the volume, so in order to match a specific gravity, its apparent volume when it comes to the medium of light would decrease, and then transferring water to air would, in its sense, cause its apparent volume to increase, which causes this curvature, is what I'm thinking is getting at here. Which, yeah, I can kind of see that. One can therefore also say conversely that the specific amount of air is qualitatively altered, i.e., is contracted into the space it would occupy were it converted into water. Since now air has a lower specific gravity and the same volume of air, consequently acquires as water space a lesser volume, the space is raised and is also reduced in size on all sides. This is the sort of way in which this phenomenon is to be grasped. It may appear artificial, but there is no alternative. It is said the light waves propagated through the medium, but here the entire medium, the transparent, illuminated water space, is posited within its own specific gravity in another medium, not as a mere radiation. The light must not be represented as a material propagation. The water, as visible, is ideally present in the air. The presence is a specific gravity. With the specific determinants alone, the water preserves and exerts itself into that which has been transformed, and so transforms this in its transformation into itself. It is as if a human cell placed into an animal body should maintain itself in it and amplify it to a human form, or as if the soul of a mouse in an elephant's body should be elephantine and yet at the same time should reduce and dwarf the body into its own size. The best example is to be found in the world of ordinary thought, where the relation to the object is ideal, and yet our thinking likewise achieves such belittlement. A petty soul, for example, measures the grandeur of a great man's heroic deed by its own dwarfish standards and reduces it to its own level, so that its littleness sees a deed only with such greatness as it has imparted itself imparted to it. As the hero I imagine is actively present in me, if only in ideal fashion, so too does air receive within itself the visual space of the water and dwarf it to itself. Again, this is metaphysically, but I can almost feel it empirically too. It is this reception which is the hardest to grasp, simply because it is an ideal, but at the same time an active real existence. It is the medium qua transparent, which constitutes its immaterial nature, yet this like quality which can be immaterially present in another place, and yet stay as it is. Thus it is that in transparency the material body is transfigured into light. Which I'm still having trouble grasping exactly what he is saying there, but I mean, it almost kind of feels like a perspective translation is how my brain is picturing it. So the way that water then is transposed to air causes a change so that I guess I'm having a hard time expressing what my understanding is there, but it's, it's I guess yes, basically because you're like transporting water into kind of an airspace that makes it different, and then vice versa that causes this. And so there's like a translation is what it feels like he's trying to say. Does that make any sense, Matt? Jim?
Yeah.
I'm right there with you in terms of understanding. I'm trying to grasp some of this.
Of course. Okay, maybe because this is the empirical part, and this is Snell's law, which at
Yeah.
least I learned throughout school. The
So like
empirical.
light is what it is,
Mhm.
okay, no matter what medium it travels through, whether it's air or space or water. But depending on the medium, the way we perceive the light is going to be different. And so, and dealing with that in a metaphysical way, uh, as well as the the real active existence of what's going on, right? And
Right.
we have ways of measuring that and putting a real, behind that word of exist. We know that light exists. Being able to describe it as, accurately as possible, um, depends on our ability to capture it in the ideal. And yeah, that's as far as my train of thought goes when I'm reading, what what you just went over. Like, what's the line in talking about this stuff between metaphysical and what's actually there? And, you know, even modern scientific explanations gloss over how different the two could be. And Hegel's entire point in this book is that you actually have to be aware of the difference between the ideal and the real in order to, do this kind of work properly. So yeah, light like quality. And he's talking about like the water. So you take the water and you shine light through it, and it takes on a light like quality, takes on the quality of light, and um do you put the glowing down to it being water, or do you put it down to the light that's passing through it?
Oh, right.
You know what I mean?
So realized something else. So it's sort of, I mean, the thing he says about water space and airspace, it's like you can like how to find space in more than one way that's fixed, but these two interact with space, kind of its visual space differently. And so in their own medium, it's fine. They both are going to appear relatively the same from either perspective, but once they interact, the two places aren't, equal, so you get refraction from that. So in the sense that the water place turning to airspace is as if airspace is infected by water and vice versa, that the air seems to infect the light that comes into the water. That's what he means by right. He goes, the air as if it had a higher density of water. This airspace is ideally infected by the water's determination. The space of visibility of the air is contracted as if the air itself had water's density. This contraction shows up only as a shift of where the thing appears. Okay.
Think we might be getting too bogged down in the physics of this because
Yeah, I'm just, well,
it's literally been 50 years since I studied optics. And I mean, Hegel's presentation is a bit outdated anyway. I mean, he's basically seems to be tying down to differences in specific gravities between different media. And there's more to it than that. You
yeah.
know,
And I guess, yeah, I think it's just the way he's explaining it was a little different, but when he's talking about the volume compressing, it just sort of the kind of distances get squashed while air, light coming from air to water makes the distance look expanded. So it's that kind of it's kind of is a kind of translational perspective that
Yeah,
kind of can happen through there's many different examples of those kind of appearance differences throughout physics. So that's what he's really getting at there. And he's still getting his zoomed work done. Um, the extent of the difference between two places. Yeah, basically he's talking about Snell's law here. That it's the translation, like, the angle of incidence and then the area of refraction leads to the appearance, but from that alone, it would say that a direct angle down makes no difference just from that equation, and yet we see that the distance to the bottom is shortened. So clearly it's not just the angle by itself. Yeah, I know we're saying to get bogged down, Jim, but it's kind of gets a little difficult when you're having trouble grasping what he's really trying to say there. So you're going to get too bogged down in details.
Yeah, and he's
Yeah,
ultimately he's aiming for showing the order of the metaphysical when talking about nature and matching it up with the science at the time. So of course the science at the time could be completely outdated, but we've already kind of covered that, even if the science gets updated, the the categorical structure of the book of the system doesn't necessarily suffer from an
right.
update. It just means that you might
Yeah, Jim.
um
Right. So, oh, he did say it kind of here too. The simplest possessed by physical medium and specific, again, so because of the density differences, in the density differences using air and water, the volume of water with the image in it is seen in a transparent air as if with the same volume air with the volume of water, and vice versa, so-called refraction. Again, that's almost kind of reminds me of a perspective of I guess you call it space-time contraction when they're moving faster.
yeah.
It is really just a matter of perspective, and it's the same thing here. The refraction makes water light coming from water to air to appear compressed and vice versa if air going into water. That's all that was. Okay. 319, the difference densities which determine the visibility of objects and which exist in different media are in the first instance only externally compared and unified. In nature of crystals, this comparison is internal. Crystals have, on the one hand, a great general transparency, but on the other hand, they possess their inner individualization, their basic structure, a form deviating from the exact formal likeness, which is
Hmm.
the cubic shape, according to the notes, to which this general transparency belongs. This form is also shape as basic structure, but is likewise ideal. Subjective form, which, like specific gravity, actively determines space. It consequently determines spatially manifests visibility in a specific fashion distinct from the first. Abstract transparency, double refraction. Yeah, because their inner structure forms is also shaped as basic structure, but is also likewise ideal. Right? Are you look good at that, Matt? Or because
Yeah.
as per usual, probably get more later on.
So, oh, okay. All right, my audio was on. So, like So when he's talking, yeah, like he's talking about something here that's very abstract in terms of how we perceive, um, like the structure of the different mediums visually, and how, we usually compare them externally, like he says, air, water, glass, that kind of thing. Um, and the inner individualization, air is made up of atoms, water the same, glass the same, just different densities in terms of those things. Although um, the density of these things was determined by their ability to transmit light in different, well, light, and then comparing those measurements, like, several slides up, we saw the refraction gradient, uh the diagrams from a few pages ago. That's what I'm getting from this. But I mean, yeah. Spatially manifest visibility in a specific fashion distinct from the first. Abstract disparity, transparency, double refraction. Okay.
I almost feel like double
I don't
refraction.
know. I don't know.
As regards to infrastructure of crystals in which double refraction of light occurs, and cube. The phenomenon is met with in all transparent crystals whose primitive form is neither a cubic nor a regular octahedron. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
not sure that's again referring to. The category of force could probably be used here since the rhomboidal form, the most usual among forms deviating from exact formal likeness of shape, cubic, individualizes the crystal internally through and through, but if the crystal is not accidentally split into lamellel, does not come into existence as shape, oh, it must have been cut exactly, and does not in the least interrupt or disturb the perfect homogeneity and transparency of the crystal, but operates only as an immaterial determinate. In reference to this passage from an at first externally positive relationship to its form as internally active determinate or force, I quote nothing more appropriate or posits than Ghost's description of relation between external apparatus of two mutually facing mirrors and the phenomena of the entropic colors produced in the interior of a glass cube placed between them. Ghost says apropos of natural transparent crystallized bodies that nature has constructed in the innermost part of such bodies a mirroring apparatus exactly like that we have made with external physical mechanical means. An interior damask web woven by nature. In this collation of outer and inner it is not, I repeat, a question of refraction mentioned in this paragraph, but of an external double mirroring and a phenomena corresponding to it in the crystal's interior. A similar distinction must be made with regard to what is said in the same work. It could be quite distinctly observed in a Romadarian of Iceland spar that the varying lie of layers consequently interplay of reflection, where the immediate cause of the phenomena this paragraph is concerned with, so to speak, rom rhomboidal force or activity, not with the action of existent lamellel. I figure we could stop here because it's almost 9. Of it.
Yeah, yeah, and for this section, he's really like, it's difficult to think about the abstract double refraction, and so he's given us an experiment to, like, that has been done, by his
Mhm.
time, that seems to approximate the what's going on in the real world, um in terms of this ideal shape.
Yeah, I'm almost thinking kind of like, oh,
You know what I mean? So you have two
I think I
mirrors, and then
know
you
what.
have
Yeah,
a mirror object in the center, and then you look at it and see what the effect is. And
I'm assuming.
I'm having a hard time picturing it, but then again, I'm not.
Give me a second. I might have something if this isn't gonna act. Okay, whatever. There we go. And of course, this is double refraction.
Mm-hmm.
It will split unpolarized light into two polarized rays. But effectively this. So you got one ray going straight one direction, one ray going the other direction, a different direction.
Yeah.
Which of
Hmm.
course we see in the sparkleness of certain gems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm. Makes sense.
All right, I think the problem is I need to go revisit some of these phenomena he's referring to get the picture.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have it as maybe t had too specific a physics interpretation of refraction, not the more basic form. That was more his time. That would have made more sense too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is interesting though, think that double refraction is just polar splitting. Which I was thinking I'll send you a video about somebody using that to kind of make their own version of the. I'm trying to remember the name of the experiments, but it's the one that allegedly makes the future cause of change in the past. It's really just a reflection of how waves work at a quantum level.
Yeah.
I don't remember what that's called. I'll have to figure that out.
So we should probably read from page 194. That's 320, the paragraph 320. So page 194 to um hang on. Where are we going? There's quite a lot here. Um, ew, Jesus, it's quite a bit of.
Yeah, that's a lot of
I mean, it just goes
commentary.
on. I said 194, and I'm already at 214. And
It
the
217 is where that ends.
okay, well, let's call it 194 to 217 and see how
Mhm.
far we get. Okay,
I'll see if
because
I can summarize that then.
yeah, and most of that is Zuzats, so it's like, yeah,
Prism double refraction. Okay.
yeah. So if we only get 10 pages, that's fine too, you know. But that's kind of what we're looking at if we want to cover all that's left up to the next section. Sound good?
I
Yep.
was trying to figure out what the metaphysical points were supposed to have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we got bogged down in the optics and physics.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
that's a good idea, Jim. We'll try and focus on the metaphysical and then draw out what we can, maybe
I mean,
in
obviously,
some general points instead of
obviously he was a former physics teacher and he really went to town
yeah.
on that stuff
Yes,
and
he
yeah.
is.
probably overdid it.
Well, that's what he likes to do apparently. I love it. All right, comrades. I'll see you in a week.
Yep.
You guys take care.
Bye.